Welcome to the Sermon Prep Podcast. I'm Dan Metzger, and I'm excited to bring this to you. This is our very first podcast that we're doing. About 3 months ago or so, we did a survey here at the church, and one of the things we wanted to know, because our goal is to help make disciples of Jesus Christ. If we were going to make disciples, we wanted to know what are some of the ways that you want to be discipled. And we offered a bunch of different things, and during one of our sermons, we actually did a live poll. We gave some different options of ways that that you could be discipled, different things that we could use, different tools we could give you. Number one on the list was daily scripture reading, and so we, made sure to put out some daily scripture readings. We're looking at different ways that we can continue to kind of enhance that. But number two, surprisingly, was there seemed to be a desire for a podcast that you could listen to be able to, throughout the week, whether, not on Sunday morning or necessarily the Wednesday night Bible studies or something like that, but some way during the week that you could turn this on and just have a little bit of an opportunity to, do some work of the faith, to do some things to help move you forward in your faith journey. And so we thought, well, let's give it a try. So we're going to be doing this today. It's called Sermon Prep because the idea behind what this is going to be is that every week I'll try to bring you a short podcast that has a little bit of some of the stuff that I'm thinking about as I'm putting my sermon together for the week. And some of this might be stuff that hits the cutting room floor. You would be surprised how long my sermon would be if I didn't cut stuff. So if you think it's long now, it could be worse. So it could be some of that stuff. It could be just a little bit more insight into, something that I'm talking about briefly during the sermon, but that has a whole lot more to it. And that's actually what a part of today is going to be. Or it might just be something else that we're kind of thinking about, something we're doing in the community as we are trying to live out our faith in our community. So today, what I wanted to talk about, we're going to be starting the season of Lent. Lent actually started on Wednesday with our Ash Wednesday service, and if you were there, it's a really important and special time where we kind of quiet our hearts and our minds and set our faces towards these next 40 days minus Sundays that lead us up to the Easter celebration. And this has traditionally been a time when people may fast or they might pick up a spiritual practice. One of the spiritual practices I'm picking up is doing this. You might not think of this as a spiritual practice, but this is just another way I'm setting aside some time to be able to focus on God and focus on the things of God and my own spiritual journey. And so maybe you're picking up a spiritual practice. Maybe you decide that you are going to use this as a time when you pick up a mission or a ministry or some way that you are serving. There's no wrong answer to this, whatever it might be. But we started Ash Wednesday, was the beginning of Lent, and this Sunday will be the first Sunday of Lent. We're going to be talking about through there's 6 Sundays that are going to make up this Lenten season, and then we'll have the Easter Sunday celebration. We're going to be talking about the upper room, all the things that happened in the upper room in John's gospel. It's really interesting. All 4 gospels mention the upper room. They all mention that a meal happened in the upper room. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they really kind of focus on what we might know of as communion or the Lord's Supper, how he took bread and broke it and said, "This is my body broken for you." And he took the cup and said, "This is my blood poured out for you." The very familiar words, the things that we talk about. We do communion here once a month on the first Sunday of the month usually. And that's what Matthew, Mark, and Luke kind of focus on. Now, each of them add just a couple of other little details, but they mostly focus on that part of the meal that night. John's gospel, though, spends 5 chapters in the upper room. And doesn't even mention the institution of the Lord's Supper, doesn't mention the breaking of bread and saying, this is my body, and the cup, this is my blood. He doesn't even mention that. He mentions the bread at one point in time when he talks about offering it to Judas to dip it in the bowl with him. But other than that, he does not mention that part of it. So we're going to be walking through John's gospel, and what does he talk about? What are the things he talks about? And a lot of it are kind of some of the teachings of Jesus. Like, it's almost like Jesus saying, I'm about to go. These are, if you don't remember anything else I said, here is our, it's time to cram for the final exam. It's time to, this is all of the stuff that's really, really important. Everything that you've seen over these last 3 years, I'm summing it all up in this night. And in these teachings, these things that I'm offering you tonight, we're going to be, we're going to be talking about these things because I want to make sure you get it before I go. So he begins the night with, and this is what we're going to be talking about this Sunday. He begins the night with this, this really peculiar act of washing his disciples' feet. John's gospel is the only one that mentions that he washes his disciples' feet. This was a practice, and if you don't want any spoilers for Sunday, you should turn the podcast off because I'm going to give you some spoilers. But these are good things to think about as you're kind of coming in. This practice of washing your feet, this was something that was done throughout the ancient Middle East. It was this Greco-Roman tradition. We actually see it in Homer's Odyssey. We see Odysseus have his feet washed, and that was written in like the 8th century BC, I think. So much older than the time of Christ. This has been a tradition in the area for a long, long time because, and it makes a lot of sense, people would wear essentially sandals, open toe, your foot is exposed to the elements, and there were no paved roads, really. It was very dusty. There were, animals left their little presence along the trails, the same trails that you walked. And, when you would get to a home, even today, you get to somebody's house and before you go in, you wipe your feet before you go in, right? Well, you would get to your intended house or place that you are going to, and your feet are going to be a mess. And so what they would do is they would have a bowl, a basin, and a pitcher by the door, and you could wash your feet. And if it was a more well-to-do home, maybe there would be a servant who would be there to wash your feet. I don't think this was probably an everyday occurrence. This was an act of hospitality, something that the Greeks called xenia, Xenia in the English translation of it. And it was this guest friendship kind of thing that was a part of their culture, a part of society. What you do, you offer this to your friends. So probably every time, a wife's husband went out and did some work and came back in, I'm sure she wasn't there just ready to wash his feet. She probably said, wash your own feet. But if it was an occasion, a nice dinner, a time where you're going over to somebody's house, you would wash your feet, or a servant would be there to wash your feet. If it was a very special guest, then sometimes the host of the party or the owner of the house would actually come, and as a great sign of xenia, of this guest friendship, would wash the guest's feet for them as a way of really honoring them, of really kind of humbling themselves and honoring them to do this. This oftentimes, though, was the job of the lowest servant in the house. This is a dirty job. This is not a fun job. It was often a woman's job. That's what we see in the story with Odysseus, is that it's a female, somebody who actually was his nursemaid when he was a child. That's who washed his feet. It was the lowest ranking person got this job. So for Jesus to do this on this night, it says a couple of things. One, this is a group of just dudes who just walked right by the basin when they came in. They had no intention of washing their own feet or anyone else's, for that matter. They weren't going to be doing that. They just kind of walked right by it. maybe their mind was on other things. In John's gospel, they had just been at the Palm Sunday parade. They had just been out and seen Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead. So their minds might be other places. We can give them that. And this is also the Passover celebration. This is a big deal. I mean, this is one of the most holy days of the year, one of the most exciting days of the year. And maybe some of them are missing being able to celebrate it with their families. Their minds could be 1,000 places. Who knows what the excuses are? But what we see happen is Jesus, noticing this, gets up from the meal, goes over, takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around his waist, and begins to wash the disciples' feet. And it's just this entirely countercultural, going against the norms kind of act. Peter, of course, can't take it, doesn't know why Jesus would do something like this, thinks that it is beneath Jesus to do this. This is not a Jesus job. This is a girl's job. This is the job of maybe the host of the party if the guests were honored guests who were higher social status, but that's absolutely not the case with Jesus. Jesus, you should not be doing this. And Jesus goes on to tell them and to teach them about humility and about this idea that we see throughout the Gospels that if you want to be great in the kingdom of God, you've got to learn to be a servant of all. If you want to be first, you have to be last, and the last are going to be first. And he turns everything on its head. He's really tearing down all of these social hierarchies, all of these things that people have built up in their minds as the way life is supposed to work. And I'm going to unpack that a lot more in the sermon, but one thing that I thought we could unpack here today and just talk about a little bit is this idea of what does foot washing look like for us today? Obviously, it's not a custom that we normally practice in Western culture. If I came over to your house and you were there with a bowl of water to wash my feet, I would probably turn around and walk out. That would be weird to me. But, there are different ways that we wash feet today, that we humble ourselves, that we serve others. There's different ways that we do that now. So I was thinking about, what does foot washing look like for us? There's this great little book. It's called The Practice of the Presence of God. And it's a lot of the teachings and the stories about a guy named Brother Lawrence. Brother Lawrence was a Carmelite monk, I think in the 17th century in France. And he had come from not very much. And he wanted to join a monastery. He wanted to become a monk. He goes and he joins. He's hoping that he's kind of a big, awkward oaf of a guy. And he's really hoping that they'll kind of correct that in him, that he'll become something better. He's hoping that through all these teachings and all of this spiritual practice and the study that he does, that he'll become this great disciple in some way. Instead, he gets assigned to the kitchen. He's finding that all of these other times of prayer and these theological discussions and all these things, they don't seem to be for him. The leaders recognize this in him. They assign him to the kitchen. And every day he's just making the meals and he's washing the dishes. This becomes his job for the monastery. And at first, I think he was a little bit depressed about this. He did not particularly care for this kind of work. He did not like working in the kitchen. He wasn't a cook naturally. That wasn't his thing. But he began to see in these menial tasks, in these acts of service that maybe the other monks didn't even bother thanking him for. It didn't really matter. He was finding in these acts of service that he was experiencing the presence of God in the midst of all of this, in the midst of what he was doing, in the midst of making the meals and in the midst of cleaning the dishes and the pots and the pans. And he has this prayer that's written down that I just love. It says, Lord of all pots and pans and things, make me a saint by getting meals and washing up the plates. I just think that's such a cool thought, such an incredible idea. Sometimes we think of the religious greats, the people who really get it, are the people who are the ones who get microphones and who get, have all the followers on social media, or the biggest churches, or the best-selling books. They're the ones. But I think it's really the guys like Brother Lawrence who maybe get it more than anyone else, who are in the background, serving, finding ways to experience what it is to be close to God in doing the small and the everyday things for others, the ways that we serve others. And one of the things that I love about our church is that we find all of these different ways to serve in small ways that a lot of times people don't even see, whether it's putting the bags together for Give a Crock, or it's the ladies who were cleaning the kitchen this last week when nobody else was around and nobody else was noticing, and they came in and were scrubbing in all the nooks and the crannies and just trying to keep it a clean place so that we can be able to do more for our community and be able to serve meals. And it's the people who are working in the sound booth and just doing all of the small little tasks and doing it for the glory of God. Those are the things that I think are so special. There's 1,000 ways. You have 1,000 opportunities every day to wash someone's feet. And the bonus part is you don't have to touch actual feet and actual stinky feet. There are other ways that we do this now in life, that we serve one another. Maybe there's even ways that you serve at home, that you serve your family, that you wash their feet in a beautiful and selfless kind of way. What are the ways in which you are loving others selflessly, with no regard for whether or not something is beneath you, or whether or not this shouldn't be your job, like I shouldn't have to do this thing? When you serve in that way, I think it's a chance for us to get a glimpse of what Jesus was trying to teach us that night in the upper room, as we are diving more into what it means to live a Christ-like life. One of the last things he wanted his disciples to know was that it's not about being the greatest, or being the person that everyone notices, or being the person that gets all the reward or the recognition. That following him is about being a servant. And so a part of my challenge to you as we're in this season of Lent is to look for ways to wash feet, look for ways to be a servant. And I hope that God will bless you during this season, and that you will find this to be a time where you grow closer and closer, and maybe like Brother Lawrence, you can experience and practice the presence of God. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to try to put these out every Friday if possible. That's my goal right now. We'll see what happens. But thank you so much for joining us on the very first Sermon Prep Podcast.